last conversation I had with this 31-year-old female, this architect, this very highly educated architect, said, Carly, I want to become more financially independent. And so I said, great. She signed on the program. And we had our very first meeting, which we talk about personal budgets. And then really what that personal budget does is shows all that extra income.
Or if you don't have extra income, where you need to cut back, right?
Yeah.
Like my it's funny because I was going to show you this, actually. Google maps out my timeline. I don't know if you can see this.
Oh.
And it shows me how much time I spent doing different activities.
Oh, that's awesome.
When I was in Chicago. And I spent apparently 18 hours and 47 minutes eating and drinking.
Wow.
Wait, and I only
spent great consumer intel.
Oh my God. And I only spent an hour and 20 minutes getting some culture.
Wow. Oh boy, does that show an American society or what?
Oh my God.
We are a consumer society.
Hilarious.
Not a culture society. Yeah, but we were, the last conversation we had, we talked about 401ks and we talked about, we started to peak on diversification, but I thought this would be a great place to start because this fantastically brilliant woman signed up for her 401k on day one of her job, but hadn't looked at it. So what I like to do is have them log on with me with their permission, of course, and they share their screen and I watch them kind of stumble through their 401k platform, and we looked at what her current asset allocation was, and we talked a little bit about this before, asset allocation, and she's in a balanced portfolio. Well, that might be good for some. She's got a long time horizon. She's not risk adverse. She just kind of picked this because someone told her to do it.
Please tell me it's not a target date fund.
It's not that. Thankfully.
Good. Yay.
I know. Thank goodness. Boy. I know.
Oh, man. The worst investment ever.
Yeah.
Easy, right? I don't know anything about investments, so I'll just pick my target date and call it a day.
So what we did, I had her click in. I said, okay, do you know what you're invested in? No. Well, great. Let's learn. So she goes into her pie chart. We had to click in, and she sees all these different funds. And, she gets up and she's like, what is it that I have? I said, well, this is like a minivan ride, and I think you can handle a little faster than this. What do you think? She's like, yeah. So we started to talk about asset allocation and talk about diversification and how that can create, in the proverbial world of my car analogy, speeds or rides. Do I want smooth? Do I want fast, bumpy? What do I want? What can I handle? So I thought
what can you handle?
Yeah,
that's a key.
Well, then
that's a key piece.
That's where I want you to kind of pick up.
So look, a couple of things. I'm very much a proponent of investing to your comfort level. And that's really important because you don't know until you're there, until you're in a 2008 scenario where your portfolio, somebody told you should be all in equities because you're 20 years old, but you've saved $100,000 and now you're looking at $45,000 instead of $100.
Yeah, the floor just falls right out from under you.
The floor falls out, and I've seen people, and I've been there myself, where you're so scared and you're like, oh my God, I have to do something. I've got to stop this. This is horrible. And they sell it right at the bottom or near the bottom. Then the market blasts off and recovers, and they're sitting there with their $45,000 now, and they don't get it back to the high water mark. And it might take them a decade, even with savings, to get it back, depending on how much they're saving. So, I'm really a proponent of understand where your comfort level is and invest to that comfort level. And I can show people that by actually taking less risk, you can get more return than by being in all-in equities.
What a good point. I mean, our last conversation, we talked about some of the women that I'm speaking with are saying, in a down market, do I continue to contribute to my 401k? And our advice is yes, because you're going to be buying in at a lower number, and it's over time and it's consistent. We talked about seasoning earlier, right? Time in the market. So
don't try to time the market.
And
it's
sell.
Impossible.
Don't sell, for crying out loud.
Oh,
right?
No. Worst thing you can do is take your lumps. If you were too aggressive and you can't, and the pain is awful, forget about it. In fact, put more money in.
Don't sell, but you're saying maybe change allocation. Maybe change
once you recover, not until you recover.
So a person should wait.
Yes. If you find yourself in that uncomfortable situation and your portfolio drops
where
55%.
your stomach hurts and you're like sweating and you
and
can't
you're
believe
losing sleep
it.
at
Yeah,
night.
that
Yes.
one.
Yes. Do not sell. Do not moderate then.
So you're saying suck it up,
Suck it up.
white knuckle it.
White knuckle it till at least you get back to where you were. Then adjust
And
your
then make your
allocation.
adjustments.
And I've shown this. If you take a portfolio like 2008 and you sell some, or you back off, not sell, but you just back off in your risk tolerance and your risk.
It would take forever
allocation
to get back, right?
It can take you a decade to get back because
Yeah.
you've now locked in a portion of your losses, right? So what you want to be doing there is dumping more money in, or just keep doing what you're doing, keep putting the money in, dollar cost average in, and you'll be fine over the long term. But don't back off at the bottom
That
or
is
near the
really
bottom.
good advice. So anybody out there, do not back off or change your allocation in that terrible moment. Wait until you recover from and get back to where you were, then make the adjustment.
And that's why it's so important to start out with an allocation that you
works
can
for
live
you.
with.
I see.
That you can live with, right?
Yep.
So you don't find yourself in that very uncomfortable situation, being afraid, losing sleep at night, wanting to sell it, and possibly doing that because the temptation's there.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Is there a possibility for people in their 401k, and maybe this is just segments of things, this particular individual was contributing 5% pre-tax.
Okay, that's not even enough to get the full company match, though.
Exactly.
That's free money. I mean, obviously, at least do that at a minimum.
Exactly, and that's what I was explaining to her and expressing, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even know." I said, "Then okay, let's look back at your personal budget and see how much disposable income you have." This is even after she's paying back student loans, she's putting money into her mortgage, she's got a lot of disposable income. Is it possible for her to have different sets of speeds or allocations inside a 401k, or should she just maybe open another account or something?
You can play that game. You can say, oh, I'm going to be, all in equities here and I'm going to be less aggressive here. But the whole pile is what matters, right? Because you're going to look at that number as the market goes down and it's either going to scare you or it's not. Or you might look at the all in equity side and it really scares the heck out of you, even though the part that's sort of more conservative. I'm not a fan of doing that. I don't think there's any advantage.
Any benefit. Okay.
Not really.
Because she asked me that question. I said, I don't think that really would be great. We could talk about different kinds of investments.
Yeah, I wouldn't go mixing up those allocations. Where it does make sense, let's say you've got an emergency fund where you might need to pull that money. Yeah, absolutely. Be really conservative there, and maybe be more aggressive in your 401k where it's 15, 20 years out, 30 before you're going to need it. But I want to go back to that point of the person putting in 5%. Mm-hmm. Most company matches, I think they work that if you put 6% in, they'll match up to 3% of it. So think about that. That's a 50% return. It's free money.
Yep.
If the market stays flat, you're getting a 50% return on that investment, right? Because they're matching half of it.
Yep. Yeah, and in fact, and even on the platform when she logged in, it suggested to her to be between 6 and 10%. So it was telling her. And I think what's important in the message for all of this is this exercise that we take people through and we have them log into their 401ks to actually manage or see what it is that they have. Mm-hmm. That's an opportunity for her that she didn't even know. So by not checking, you're doing yourself a disservice, not only short term, but obviously long term too.
Well, and what do you need to know as an investor? At a minimum, you need to understand, does your company match? And if so, how much do they match? And how much do I have to contribute at a minimum to get that entire match?
Right.
If you don't do that, you're really hurting yourself.
And too, Calvin, a lot of different companies use different platforms. So, right? So it's not like someone is reaching through the computer and telling you, this is what you should do because these are all the things or specific details to the kind of offering that we have. Nobody really walks you through that. So you have to be an advocate for yourself.
Why don't we put together a minimum primer about, here's the things you need to think
That's
about
so
for a
great.
401k,
That's
right?
perfect.
Make sure you get all the company match. Make sure you allocate to your tolerance.
Like a checklist of this is what you do.
And make sure you don't over diversify, right? We were going to talk about diversification, and
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
Okay, so I keep coming back to Warren Buffett. He said it so well. Diversification is protection against ignorance. It doesn't make sense if you know what you're doing. Now, in his case, he's thinking pure equities.
Right.
Right? He researches companies. He finds companies that are undervalued in his estimation, have great growth trajectories, and he buys cheap and holds them for the long term. So he doesn't want to diversify. He wants to pick a few companies where he believes in the management, he believes in the business model, and he does that. Okay?
Is that really his saying? What does he say?
We think diversification is, as practiced generally, makes very little sense for anyone that knows what they're doing. Diversification is a protection against ignorance.
So in his But that also works for portfolios, for normal people, right? If you scatter your investments all over the place, put them in international, put them in real estate, commodities, blah, 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 on and on, all sorts of bonds. You just diversify very broadly. What happens is you end up with a portfolio where some things are going up and some things are going down. So your returns are over the long term. And I'll tell you what your returns will be over the long term. 5 to 5.5, maybe 6%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And that sounds okay for some people, but the flip side of it is that
what are you leaving on the table, kind of thing? What are you walking away from?
Well, two pieces. What are you walking away from, and how much do you get hurt in a downturn? So you're going to get the same 5.5, let's call it 5.5% return, whether you're conservative, moderate, or aggressive. But what happens in a 2008 to 2009 scenario? Well, in the aggressive case, you lose, if you're 80% exposed to equities, you lose 48% of your investment. Where if you're in the conservative case, you lose 26%. By the way, that's not very conservative in my book.
Yeah.
Right? But so here's a portfolio that gives you blah returns, and you don't get more return for taking more risk. But what you get is more loss when things go down.
Yeah.
That's not a great trade-off.
No. But I think I've heard you say in the past that you can take risk or measured risk and actually have less of a loss during a downturn. You said something earlier. Yeah, that was you were talking about you could take a little bit more risk, meaning you get more return, but in the downturn, you don't lose as much. You were talking about that.
Yes, sort of. So what is real diversification? Well, real diversification in my book are two investments that are truly investments so that over the long term, they have some benefit, right? They go up some amount. But in a downturn, one goes one way and one goes the other way.
Yeah.
So
an inverse relationship.
Yeah. So they kind of offset each other. Now, there's no perfection there. That's not always going to be the case. But in general, equities or risk assets tend to be risky. They tend to go up more because they're riskier. And then government treasuries, the safest investment in the world, pay dividends and tend to be kind of blah and boring. But when the market drops, they tend to go up. Now, that doesn't always happen. It certainly didn't happen this year because interest rates are going up. So treasuries are going down, equities were going down, everything was going down. Commodities peaked out back in March and they went down. So everything has been going down. This is a really unusual market. But if you look over a 20-year time frame, having safety treasuries where you're not reaching for return on that side, you're reaching for safety, and equities together act in a very nonlinear
way, yeah.
In a nonlinear way, right? You get 1 + 1 = 3 or 4.
Right.
It's kind of a weird thing that most people don't understand.
And it's getting that mix right. It's not 1 for 1. Sometimes, right?
In fact, if you take a portfolio 50% in long-term treasuries or intermediate to long treasuries and 50% equities, the resultant portfolio will actually perform as well or better than either of the constituent parts.
Yeah.
In fact, you'll get a lot less risk than either of the parts, and you'll get almost the return, or in some cases more return than the S&P 500 over the long term. That's a huge win.
That is so interesting. So a lot of the clients that I work with, Calvin, for a long time have been in real estate. And real estate developers in general understand that tangible asset, and they're much more comfortable talking about real estate. They don't understand the market as much because it's not as black and white. It does take a trained professional or technician that understands how to create and build solid portfolios to deliver what you're talking about. So I'm glad you're talking about these things, and I'm bringing up the real estate investor in this conversation because I think it's important for them to understand exactly what it is you're saying in their lingo.
I see what you're talking about. Yes.
I wanted to say that because they don't understand what you just said. And so I like to give them something that they understand so that when they're talking to somebody like you, they can ask the right questions to understand how these particular sectors behave.
Yeah, it's similar. Although I'm guessing when real estate tanks, it tends to tank across the board. Like commercial doesn't necessarily do well, and residential drops, and vice versa. Right. I'm guessing they tend to go tank in unison.
Well, what's interesting, because of the pandemic, the commercial real estate sector, it's not so good, but residential now is going great because people. So I want to say that yes, commercial real estate right now is not as attractive as it once was, while residential real estate is very attractive. So
people figured out they didn't have to go to malls.
Right, exactly. But if you put those two together and you have residential building and you have commercial building, now you've got what you're describing between equities and bonds as a more balanced portfolio where you could maybe actually make greater returns over time because you've put them together. So to what you just said, to a real estate developer out there, that will help them understand.
Sure. But look, equity portfolios don't need to be complicated. They shouldn't be complicated. Pick a good index fund. I prefer the NASDAQ 100 because it's not as diversified. It's only 100 stocks.
Yeah.
It's 100 stocks, not 500 like the S&P 500. They're more forward-looking companies. So the net result is over the long term, you're ending up with higher returns from that side of your portfolio. And then couple that with government treasuries. 7 to 10 year government treasuries are fine. If you want to be more aggressive, go with 20-year duration. But you'll end up with a very nice portfolio. It's very simple.
Yeah.
2 things, right? 2 pieces. Not hard to understand. Now, the problem is most 401k plans don't offer pure treasury funds. They offer diversified bond funds. But if you look at the details, you'll see that some of the bond funds have a pretty good chunk of treasury exposure, sometimes up to 50%. So those are the ones that I typically recommend in a 401k plan. Or if you have brokerage link in Fidelity, where you can buy whatever you want, then you can do what you want there.
Yep. I wanted to just ask you this, and you can cut this out and you can stop recording or whatever. But so here's what I was wondering.